everyone to Women Work Your Faith. My name is Sylvia Johnson, and today I'm going to be reviewing the Sunday School Lesson for Sunday, June the 16th. I don't know why my book is all the way over there. So the title for Sunday, June the 16th is Live Pure Lives. Our Bible basis comes from Haggai, the 2nd chapter, the 10th through the 19th verse. The Bible truth, live honorably. The memory verse, is the seed yet in the barn? Yea, as yet the vine and the fig tree and the pomegranate and the olive tree hath not brought forth. From this day will I bless you. And that is Haggai, the 2nd chapter, the 19th verse. Our lesson aims for June the 16th. By the end of this lesson, we will grasp Haggai's message of encouragement to press forward in rebuilding the temple. Realize that reneging on promises to God yields catastrophic results, and develop ways to commit to doing God's work on behalf of the community. So thank you to everyone who either joins this live or watches this later. Also, thank you to everyone that has sent encouraging messages in the comments. I really appreciate that you all support the channel and you all encourage me and say positive things so that I keep going. I'm learning as I'm teaching, and so this is helpful to me. And it's just, like sometimes you feel like you have to be a certain kind of way. And I really appreciate that you all have grasped on to my teaching style and my streaming style because I'm juggling a lot here, and so I'm doing the best I can. But I appreciate that you all are encouraging me to continue on. Also, I would just like to say I'm wearing, this is our Department of Women t-shirts from a few years ago, but it says, each one, reach one, teach one. And so I thought it was a great shirt to wear today for teaching the Sunday school lesson. So, and if you're wondering, I am in Kentucky First Jurisdiction. My bishop is Bishop John W. Fleming. My supervisor is Mother Romanitha Stallworth, and my pastor is Elder Stanley May, and I attend St. John's Church of God in Christ in Louisville, Kentucky. I don't know if I've ever said all of that on the channel, but there you go. So let's talk about the Sunday school lesson. In today's lesson, we are picking up right where we left off last week with the lesson. And if you all haven't noticed by now, I tend to read the basics in the Sunday school book and then teach out of the Bible. So we are picking up right after where we left off last week in the 2nd chapter of Haggai. And here a new message or another message is delivered from the Lord to Haggai, and he is taking it to the people. And so this is approximately 2 or so months after the last message about who was left among you that had seen it in its first glory, and how do you see it now? Now we're about two months and a couple of weeks, or a week or so after this, and there is a new message from God. And so it's important to note that in the time frame of building, that they weren't that far in the process. Remember, they were supposed to be rebuilding the temple. They started the foundation long ago. For numerous reasons, they stopped, and then they continued to just let it sit. And so our first Sunday school lesson for this quarter was God calling them back to their work, rebuking their behavior and their sluggishness in getting it done. Last week's lesson was an encouragement because the foundation and the presentation of the temple at this time was not like the one it had been in Solomon's time. And now this week, we are talking about the people again. And so the lesson picks up in Haggai, the 2nd chapter, the 10th verse. And it says, in the 24th day of the 9th month, in the 2nd year of Darius, came the word of the Lord by Haggai the prophet, saying. So, I mentioned that this was around 2 months after the message that we studied last week. Actually 2 months and 2 months and 3 days. But this, and it says, in the 2nd year of Darius came the word of the Lord. So that's giving you context of when this took place. If you think of Darius, and I have this scripture in the description box, but I'm not going to read it because it's going to be a little distracting to this week's lesson. But if you want to know who Darius is and when he came in, because this says in the second year of Darius, think of Darius as one of the rulers of the kingdoms that took over Israel, right? Darius, think the ruler that put Daniel in the lion's den, okay? The ruler that came after the writing on the wall. So I have that down in the description box if you want to go back and read about Darius. But this puts into context the time frame that this was taking place. And if you're interested in studying the Bible like deeply, it helps you see the order in which things were taking place. Because sometimes if you read the Bible from front to back, you think they're happening in that order, and that's not necessarily true. But the other thing I want to tell you about this verse is that the time frame of when this message from the Lord came is relevant to what it is that God is going to say. So just hold on for that. And so we continue on, and we go to Haggai, the 2nd chapter, the 11th and the 12th verse. What is the message from the Lord saying? Thus saith the Lord of hosts, ask now the priests concerning the law, saying, if one bear holy flesh in the skirt of his garment, and with his skirt do touch bread or pottage or wine or oil or any meat, shall it be holy? And the priests answered and said, no. So God is reasoning. and it will bear itself out as we continue on and see how he's doing this. And so what is he reasoning with them with? And it's kind of what we would say now is a teachable moment, right? And so he's taking something that they should be familiar with. And so he tells Haggai to go to the priests and to pose a question to them. And this would be something that they should know, because as priests, they're the only ones who bear holy flesh. Well, what is holy flesh? Those things which were sacrificed unto God. The people would bring those sacrifices to the priest, and the priest would do those sacrifices, and they would, depending on what kind of sacrifice it was, whether or not it was to be burned within the camp, within the temple, if any of it could be eaten, what happened to it was done by the priest, not by the congregation. And so the question is, if someone bears holy flesh in the skirt of his garment, and with his skirt do touch bread, so or touch bread, pottage, wine, oil, any meat, the skirt touches something else. Does what the skirt touch become holy? And the priest said, no. Now, if you go to Leviticus, the 6th chapter, I have these marked in my Bible so I won't have to keep flipping from page to page. It gives you some understanding of this law that he's questioning them on. So, if we start at the 25th verse of the 6th chapter of Leviticus, it says, speak unto Aaron and to his sons, saying, this is the law of the sin offering. In the place where the burnt offering is killed, shall the sin offering be killed before the Lord. It is most holy. The priest that offer it for sin shall eat it. In the holy place shall it be eaten, in the court of the tabernacle of the congregation. Whatsoever shall touch the flesh thereof shall be holy. And when there is sprinkled of the blood thereof upon any garment, thou shalt wash that whereon it was sprinkled in the holy place. But the earthen vessel wherein it is sodden shall be broken, and if it be sodden in a brazen pot, it shall be both scoured and rinsed in water. And so God is giving directives of what's to be done with the sin offering. The priests are supposed to eat it. And it says whatever touches the flesh is holy. So whatever touches the meat, the sin offering, is holy. And then there are certain things they had to do with things that came in contact with the sin offering or the blood, right? But the question God asked is, if his skirt or if the garment that the priest was wearing touched something else, does that thing become holy? And they're like, well, no, which was correct. And so you see the directives that God is posing towards them to consider. Okay, and remember I said he's reasoning with them. We're getting to how he's doing it. So if we move forward, and for the record, for the sake of time, I'm not, and I'm intentionally not delving into how something becomes holy and unholy and clean and unclean too much, because we'll be here a really long time trying to get through all that. So starting in the second chapter of Haggai, oh, I do want to say one note I have here, holy. So how, if it's holy flesh, does this other item become holy? So holy flesh, that was consecrated. Things that are holy are consecrated and sacred and set apart. And so what he's saying is, does the secondhand encounter make that thing holy, consecrated, and set apart unto God just because it came in contact with it? That's the question. So the second chapter of Haggai, the 13th verse and the 14th verse. Then said Haggai, if one that is unclean by a dead body touch any of these, shall it be unclean? And the priest answered and said, it shall be unclean. So then here's the next question, okay? We've established that holiness does not jump from thing to thing to thing to thing, right? But now we see if anyone that is unclean by a dead body touch any of these. So if you were encountering a holy thing and you touched it, everything else you touched did not automatically become holy just because you touched it. But if you encountered a dead body, you were unclean. And if you touched something else, that thing was unclean. And so we're going to go to Leviticus, the 22nd chapter, the 4th verse. Apparently I didn't mark this one. And here we're talking about the cleanness of the sons of Aaron, okay? And these were the people who would become priests or high priests. What man soever of the seed of Aaron is a leper or hath a running issue, he shall not eat of the holy things until he be clean. And whoso toucheth anything that is unclean by the dead, or a man whose seed goeth from him, or whosoever toucheth any creeping thing, whereby he may be made unclean, or a man of whom he may take uncleanness, whatsoever uncleanness he hath, the soul which hath touched any such shall be unclean until even, and shall not eat of the holy things unless he wash his flesh with water. And then we're going to go to Numbers, the 19th verse, the 19th chapter, the 11th verse. Now, I'm not probably going to read all of these because it goes, it has a very thorough list of encounters. And now this is applicable to the congregation. The first one was the descendants of Aaron, those who were in the priestly role, okay? This is for the congregation. He that touches the dead body of any man shall be unclean 7 days. He shall purify himself with it on the 3rd day, and on the 7th day he shall be clean. But if he purify not himself the 3rd day, then the 7th day he shall not be clean. Whosoever toucheth the dead body of any man that is dead, and purifieth not himself, defileth the tabernacle of the Lord, and that soul shall be cut off from Israel, because the water of separation was not sprinkled upon him. He shall be unclean. His uncleanness is yet upon him. And so it goes on. Every open vessel which hath no covering, like if the man dies in his tent, everything that's open in the tent is unclean. It talks about if they were slain in the sword or an open field, that shall be unclean. It says, if you go down to the 22nd verse, and whatsoever the unclean person toucheth shall be unclean, and the soul that toucheth it shall be unclean until even. And so there's a very thorough explanation about how the uncleanness of death really marks continues on to others and to other places. It's not just the people. The field was unclean, the tabernacle was unclean, the tent the person died in was unclean, the things that were open were unclean, pottery, things they touched, unclean. And so the question that God is posing is, consider this, think on this, you all. If any of these things, it says, is unclean by a dead body, and didn't touch any of these, shall it be unclean? And the priest answered and said, it shall be unclean. Now we're going to the second chapter of Haggai, the 14th verse, and it says, then answered Haggai and said, so is this people, and so is this nation before me, saith the Lord. And so is every work of their hands, and that which they offer there is unclean. And so, interesting analogy that the Lord gives us. And remember, I said he's reasoning with the people. What they have, who they are, and what they carry with them, the uncleanness of them, it affects everything they touch. And so the work that they do is unclean. Now, you're like, well, wait a minute. God told them to build the temple. We're talking about the things that they choose to do. And he talks about that as he continues on. But let's pause for a minute and consider this and how we look at ourselves, right? We think that we're good because we go to church. The children of Israel, and it's a wonderful example of us in the Bible, right? Considered themselves to be of a certain, status because they were the chosen ones of God, right? And they considered themselves, unfortunately, to just exist in that status. But to be a part of his congregation had some requirements, and you had to meet those requirements. And anything unclean could not come before him or be a part of his body. And when I mean his body, I mean the group, okay? Now, the issue is we don't realize how we defile ourselves and we defile the body in which we exist in. And so God is pointing that out. Just because you come into my holy place, you don't catch holiness. We think we do, right? We think we show up in church, and if we run around the altar, or if I place my Bible on the mantle, or I'm in church every Sunday and I sing in the choir, that I've caught holiness and I'm good. No, it doesn't work like that. But because I continuously encounter unclean things, I carry that uncleanness with me, and it taints or defiles everything that I do. And so, you're if you don't think on it really well, you're kind of confused, because like Jesus said, it isn't what's on the outside that defiles a man, right? Because that's the lesson we had a couple of weeks back, but it goes together. These are not conflicting lessons. It's all going together. So the sin that I carry with me, it is in everything I do. And so God is pointing that out when he says, so is this people, and so is this nation before me, saith the Lord, and so is every work of their hands, and that which they offer there is unclean. And it's very interesting because not typically, the law said that the priests had to sanctify themselves, right? And they had to offer a sacrifice for themselves. They had to be purified first, and then the people had to be purified. But if you bring unclean works before God and you try to offer those up to him, well, that's not going to purify you. So we have to really think about what it is and the status of our hearts and our cleanness and our rightness before him, and how that uncleanness taints everything we do. And we say, I'm doing this for the Lord. And it's like, well, no, he don't want that, because you're not doing it right. And so what do you mean? So he wants our works to be reflective of him, not reflective of the sin and the worldly ways that we carry with us. So he goes on to say, in Haggai, the 2nd chapter, the 15th verse, and now I pray you, consider from this day and upward, from before a stone was laid upon a stone in the temple of the Lord. Since those days were, when one came to a heap of 20 measures, there were but 10. When one came to the press fat for to draw out 50 vessels out of the press, there were but 20. I smote you with blasting and with mildew and with haul and all the labors of your hands, yet ye turn not to me, saith the Lord. So he is reasoning with them, okay? Just look at it. Just consider this. And not just take a look in, but really ponder this in your soul. Think about this really. Take it into your heart and consider what's happening here, okay? The temple was the place that God had promised to dwell amongst his people. It was the place for them and he to commune together, for them to be brought back into right standing, and to be united with their God. And that's what his desire was for his people to be brought back to him. And as long as they did what he said, he would bless what they did. But because their works were unclean, their hearts were unclean, and they took their uncleanness and spread it around everywhere, that didn't go well for them. And God is showing what he did in response. And he says, consider from this day forward, look back how things were, even from before you all first laid the foundation for the temple, before you started the rebuilding process. He says, when you came to a heap of 20 measures, there were but 10, so half. So he's talking about their prosperity. God had promised them when he said he would be their God and they would be his people, they would prosper in everything that they did. But he gives them detailed accountings of them not prospering. And he's letting them know that was me. So you thought when you went to get your grain that you were going to have 20 measures and you only came up with half. You thought when you were going to the press fat, when you were going to get the oil, it says you were there to get 50 vessels and there were only 20, not even half. And he says, I smote you. I struck you down with blasting and mildew and hail. I destroyed your crops. Yet you turned not to me, saith the Lord. So I did all these things in response to your uncleanness, and you still didn't turn back to me. You still did not repent. And that's, we hear that in church all the time. You need to repent. You need to repent. And we think it means go to the altar. I'm sorry, Lord. That's not what that is. That's not, I'm sorry, it's cool, but that's not what that is. In my Sunday school class, we do the demonstration, and I'm walking one way and everything good is over here. And I said, if God is everything good and I'm going this way, what do I need to do? And they're like, turn around. That's what repentance is. It's turning. You're going the wrong way. And so God is saying, I did all these things. I brought all these hardships on you. I stripped away your prosperity. And I'm working against you in all these ways. And you still won't turn back to me. And so, to give a more detailed accounting of something like this, we're going to go to the book of Amos, the 4th chapter. Now, Amos was speaking to the northern kingdom prior to destruction and then southern kingdom exile. But it's very much in line with what God is saying right here in the future. So if we go to Amos, the 4th chapter, it says in the 6th verse, and I also have given you cleanness of teeth in all your cities and want of bread in all your places. Your mouth is empty. Yet have ye not returned unto me, saith the Lord. And also I have withholden the rain from you, when there were yet 3 months to the harvest, and I caused it to rain upon one city, and caused it not to rain upon another city. One piece was rained upon, and the piece whereupon it rained not withered. Tore up the harvest. So 2 or 3 cities wandered unto one city to drink water, but they were not satisfied. Yet have ye not returned unto me, saith the Lord. He brought drought and overcrowding. I have smitten you with blasting and mildew, when your gardens and your vineyards and your fig trees and your olive trees increased. the palmer worm devoured them. Yet have ye not returned unto me, saith the Lord. He brought pestilence. And so this goes on to the 13th chapter. It says, 13th verse, I'm sorry. For lo, he that formeth the mountains, and createth the wind, and declareth unto man what is his thought, that maketh the morning darkness, and treadeth upon the high places of the earth. The Lord, the God of hosts, is his name. And so he tells them all this destruction he will bring. Like I said, Amos was talking to the northern kingdom before the destruction came, and before the southern kingdom went into exile. And so he is speaking of what type of destruction is coming at the hand of God. And he says it, all of this I'm bringing, prepare to meet your God. And it sounds cold. It was rough. It was pretty rough. But what he's saying is, you think you know him. You think you serve and you follow him. You're not with him. But he's getting ready to show up. And it's not going to be in the way that you want. And so God is speaking all these things he's going to bring on those people. And they're not going to turn back to him. And so it's the same analogy he uses here for the children of Israel who've returned from exile. I did all these things. I made you to suffer hardship, following, the sin and the uncleanness of your works. And it says, yet ye turn not to me, saith the Lord. And so it gives you time to sit and think, because that's what he wants you to do. He wants you to consider your ways. He wants you to consider what it is that you're doing, what he's doing, because God is not a petty or a tit for tat God. His work is corrective. And so the point that matters here is that I'm trying to get you to turn. Now, we as people, and this is part of our lesson aim, we as people look at what's going on in our lives, and we got a whole scroll of grievances that we want to blame on the devil. And it's really due to our uncleanness. It is us not being in line with God. And because we're not in line with him, he's not working with us. And the truth of the matter is, all God has to do is move, and there goes your prosperity, right? And so he's the one that brought life. He's the one that made things to grow. He's the one that gives joy. He's the one that makes the sun to shine. He's the one that brings the rain in its season. And so get out of line with him, and there's going to be some problems. And so if you are if you say you're saved, and you are constantly facing hardship, and you're constantly facing difficulties, and things are coming against you, and they seem to be prevailing, you need to ask yourself, is this God? And the interesting thing about God is when you talk to him, he answers. Because what he wants is for you to get in line with him. He wants you to prosper. He wants you to be well. And so if, we associate all negativity with the devil, but if you flip through your Bible, just go back to the book of Judges. It was this constant back and forth with the children of Israel. They would turn, they would start worshiping other gods, and God would send an army. God would send a famine. God would, all of these hardships, plagues, pestilence, things like that, those were the hand of God. Even if you read in the book of Ruth, when Naomi and her husband left, the very first part tells you is it came up a famine or something. And so that lets you know, famine, children of Israel, things weren't going good. And so we need to recognize that when we are in the will of God, living how he calls us to live, doing what he has told us to do, he makes the work of our hands to prosper. But when we turn away from him, and you can read this in the book of Deuteronomy, he has made it very clear how things are going to go, and it's not going to be good. So I just had to put that part in there, because a lot of us won't allow ourselves to be convicted, because we have taken on this I'm a child of God mindset, and nothing bad can happen to me. So because God is always with me and he loves me and everything's got to be good. And so we do whatever we want to do, and now you're out of the body. And you think it's the enemy working against you, but what has really happened is the enemy has gotten in your heart and you're working against yourself. So let's just really take stock of our actions and really, really get right before God and commune with him and learn what it is that he wants us to know and how he wants us to do. I had to take some time on that one. So, and I had to take some time because he said consider, so we're going to consider, okay? So if we continue on to Haggai, the 2nd chapter, the 18th verse, it says, consider now from this day and upward, from the 24th day of the 9th month, that's the day he talking, even from the day that the foundation of the Lord's temple was laid, consider it. Is the seed yet in the barn? Yea, as yet the vine and the fig tree and the pomegranate and the olive tree hath not brought forth. From this day will I bless you. So remember I said that the day he's speaking is relevant. Or the day, that Haggai brings the message is relevant. So the vine, the fig tree, the pomegranate, and the olive tree hath not brought forth. Those are fruit trees. Fruit trees should bring forth fruit. But on the day that this was taking place was later in the seasonal year, and those trees had not produced fruit. God was holding things up. And so that lets you know a couple of things that God is doing with his people. First of all, he's demonstrating his dominion over the earth. He moves things to work for our good. The seasons and the times, if you go back to Genesis, God set things in order. And then he created us and put us there, right? And he made all of those things to work for our good. And what he is demonstrating by not allowing the fields to grow, by not allowing the fruit trees to produce, is his dominion over all of that, so that we remember that he is God. Like in the book of Amos, where it says, prepare to meet thy God. You're getting ready to find out just how much of God he is. He's doing that. The next thing he's saying is you can count on that. So God gives promises. Just as I stopped this from producing, no, from this day, I will bless you. Now, not just because you're you, but remember, this book is about getting the children of Israel to do what God told them to do. Not just in rebuilding the temple. That's part of it, but it represents their obedience and their coming together and communing with him. And so from this day, if you do what I tell you to do, if you come back and be my people, it says, turn to me. Remember, it says, yet ye turn not to me. If you turn around, come on back and be with me, I will bless you. And so it sounds good. But, we don't always do that. So let's go to Zechariah. Now, first we're going to go to Haggai, because this is from the first lesson. And if you remember, I'm talking about the fruit trees that aren't producing, right? So if we go to Haggai, the 1st chapter, the 10th and the 11th verse, it says, therefore the heaven over you is stayed from dew, and the earth is stayed from her fruit. And I called for a drought upon the land and upon the mountains, and upon the corn, and upon the new wine, and upon the oil, and upon that which the ground bringeth forth, and upon men, and upon cattle, and upon all the labor of the lands. And so it says he called for a drought. And yes, the dew, the moisture from the heaven is done, and the earth isn't, but he said he dried up everything. The work of our hands, anything that we labor on, he dried it up. Nothing's going to come from that. And so then he tells us in this lesson, now consider this. Now I did this, I showed you all this. Consider it. Even though I've done all of that, I will bless you. So we need to take a minute and look at what we're trying to do with our hands. Have we defiled it? Is our greedy hearts, our selfish ways, our arrogant demeanor, our hateful spirit, our unforgiving I'm just talking about our character. I'm not even going to talk about lying, stealing, killing, and all that other stuff. Let's just start with our character. Are we defiling the work of our hands? What would it be like? And some of us are. Some of us are living in that situation right now. You're living in a drought because you have not turned to him. And so he has just sucked up everything and said, no, you can't have it. My pastor likes to say, you know, God don't have to do anything to you. All he has to do is move his hand. And sometimes he'll put you in a vice. Like in this situation, he'll put you in a hard spot and hold you there so that you can see that he's God. And it's to your benefit to follow him. And, are we doing that? Let's look at our situations. We spend so much time, and it really, it's really something we got to work on. We rebuke the enemy and everything, but he ain't in everything. He's only in the things that God allows him to be in. God is in everything. And so we really need to see, is this the work of his hand? Can we change our ways and be pleasing to him? And then we're going to go to Zechariah, the 8th chapter, just one book over. I'm not going to read all of the verses, but it's Zechariah, the 8th chapter, the 9th through the 15th verse. I do have all these in the description box. Thus saith the Lord of hosts, let your hands be strong, ye that hear in these days these words by the mouth of the prophets, which were in the day that the foundation of the house of the Lord of hosts was laid, that the temple might be built. For before these days there was no hire for man, nor any hire for beast, neither was there any peace to him that went out or came in because of the affliction. For I set all men, every one against his neighbor. But now I will not be unto the residue of this people as in the former days, saith the Lord of hosts. And then if we skip down to 14 and 15, for thus saith the Lord of hosts, as I thought to punish you when your fathers provoked me to wrath, saith the Lord of hosts, and I repented not. So he thought to do something and he didn't turn from it. He went all the way in. So again have I thought in these days to do well unto Jerusalem and to the house of Judah, fear ye not. And so just like in the instance where I decided to punish you because I was provoked and I didn't turn away from it, now I am going to do well unto Jerusalem and you don't have to fear. And so now God is saying, I'm set on this path to do well to Jerusalem. You don't have to be worried. And knowing that we can trust him at his word. If you do what it is pleasing to him to do, and he's not asking for no hard stuff. So I do have a testimony. Well, it's not really a testimony. It's kind of a story. And so this is how God has worked on me this week to help me understand this lesson. I think I told you all I work in hospice. And I have an employee that wants to move up. And they have been meeting some opposition. And I'll tell you that opposition is kind of me, right? The supervisor. And so the issue is not that I don't want the person to move up. They ain't ready. And it's not in a bad way. But it's just recognizing that they're not in the right, they're not ready. And so I sat down and I met with the person. I said, what do you think that your job is? And I didn't even think about this lesson when I posed these questions to them. I just prayed and asked God to help me do what was right because I don't want to hold people back. I want people to be blessed and I want people to prosper and I want people to do well. But I went in and I met with this person. I said, what do you think your job is? And they ran off what they thought their job was, what they believed their work to be. And I said, what do you think the job is that you want? And they ran off what they believe that job to be. And I told them, I hear you speaking and you have the basics of the positions understood. I said, but it's very transactional. It's like you're hitting a checklist. Like, yeah, I do this, I do this, I do this, I do this. And I said, the work that we do is relational. And again, I told you, we work in hospice. These are these people's last moments with their families. It's their last moments in their homes. It is, sometimes a beautiful experience, sometimes a painful experience. Sometimes they have great hardships. And then for the people that we work with, our teams that work in these homes or these facilities, day after day, in and out, they're watching wonderful, horrible, beautiful, ugly people die. And what's missing is the personal aspect. When, it can't just be a meaningless transaction. And when you remember the purpose behind what we do, it will change how you do it. And we had such a great meeting and a discussion, and it really brought us a long way. And I thought back to this lesson today, and I said, oh, when we consider our ways and why we do what we do, it'll change how we are before God. Because the issues of clean and unclean, it's not him being, OCD. It is about our hearts, what we bring into the world, what we spread to others, how we engage others, how we represent him in the earth, right? There's so much behind that. It's not just about do this on this day, check this box, wear this dress, have this hairstyle, whatever. It's about why we do what we do. And my boss told me one time, she said, you're a wonderful person and you do such a great job here. And it's not because I get everything right. It's not because I'm perfect. It's not because I have the best numbers on the team. She said, it's because you understand the mission of this place. And if you consider this lesson, what would it be like if we understood the mission? What would it have been like for the children of Israel when God said, I will bless those who bless you and curse those who curse you? What would it have been like if they understood the mission of that calling? Not for me to be elevated and for me to be brought up, but my service to the world and to others so that they can be good, so that they can know their God in the good way, so that they can have the experience of his blessings and his prosperity and his love. That's the mission. So, consider your work. Consider if you have gotten right with him, and consider what's happening around you. Is it the hand of God moving against you? And if it is moving against you, he's doing it to correct you and to straighten you out so that you can get in line with him and prosper. And he will bless you. So going back to our lesson aim, I thought I was going to be on here 20 minutes. That didn't happen. Okay. Grasp Haggai's message of encouragement to press forward in rebuilding the temple. So it's important. I think we've talked about this in the previous quarter about the temple and God's significance in building it in the perfect temple that was coming in Jesus. And so this was a work that they needed to do that was both for this time and it was representative of what God was bringing through his people. Realize that reneging on promises to God yields catastrophic results. I think I've driven that home. If I haven't, please let me know. But when we follow after God and we promise to do things for him, like when we get saved and we say, I'm a child of God, we are here to represent him in the earth. We represent him. And reneging on that, bearing false witness to who he is, carrying his name in vain, it's not going to end well. And develop ways to commit to doing God's work on behalf of the community. And so back to the last point I made about my job, understanding the mission of this place. The blessings and the prosperity that God promises are not just about me and mine and what I want for my life. His mission is for all his people. He loves his children and he wants them all to be drawn to him. He wants to commune and dwell among his people, not his person, his people. So we have to remember that the work that we do is not just about us. My life that I live for Jesus is not just about Sylvia. So I hope that you all were blessed by this lesson. And I hope that each person that watches this will consider and will look at their life and look what's going on with them and what God has called you to do, because he has a work for everybody. And that you will work in building his temple. And if you want to go back, I'm not going to read it. to Jesus in Ephesians 2:19-22. Jesus, the chief cornerstone, and us being rightly built on top of that. We need to work on building that, okay? And so go back and check that out. Thank you all very much. Be blessed, and I hope to see you all again in Sunday school. Take care. Oh, and happy Father's Day to all the fathers out there. May God bless you and your families.